While Mitzrayim was still reeling from the effects of the plague of blood, Moshe and Aaron came before Paro. Unlike the prior warning, which was more of a private affair, this time happened in front of all his dignitaries. In a public forum, he would immediately know the nature of the second plague, the covering of the land with Sephardim. What are Sephardim? This is a Hebrew word for a variant of amphibious creature, which today we call frogs. But it is important to establish that some opinions are that these creatures were not actually frogs at all, but a species of crocodile. Another opinion is that all types of amphibious animals came in exceedingly great numbers upon the land and into the homes of the Mitzrites. They would even emerge in droplets of water, which meant that they grew in the mouth and every orifice containing moisture of a person. They even fearlessly piled themselves into fireplaces and ovens, eventually snuffing out flames by their multitude. These creatures not only obstructed the daily life of the Mitzrites in these ways by their sheer mass of numbers, but through their incessant croaking sounds, which was so loud that it caused hearing problems throughout the land. On top of all this, women and children screamed so loud for so long that many people passed out through panic, disappearing under mounds of these creatures and literally drowning to death in frogs. Many Mitzrite infants died through noises alone. People were literally driven into madness. It was an horrific plague, with endless screaming coming from everywhere. It started from one huge frog hopping onto the land from the Nile. Men came with spears, clubs and rods trying to beat it to death, but as they hit it, smaller frogs began to burst out of its mouth and puncture wounds until they filled the land. The first frog kept increasing in size, with a seemingly endless supply of frogs leaping from its insides. The frogs swarmed into Paro's palace, into all his chambers, including his bedroom. This plague was to now showcase Hashem's power over land. Whereas the blood affected the waters, this plague would spill from the river into the land and into every space. The Mitzrites forbid the Hebrews from prayer, chanting and singing, so now this would be a bombardment with deafening croaking and screams as midah keneged midah, measure for measure, was meted out on the people. Even some Mitzrites who barricaded themselves in fortified chambers or caves eventually became overrun as barricades buckled under the weight of crocodiles, frogs, and sea snakes. These creatures increased by the thousands in seconds. When someone managed to go out and get water, the wells were infested with frogs. The frogs attacked every part of their bodies, climbing into their clothing and burrowing into their armpits, mouths, nostrils, ears, and private parts. They also got into food, with many Mitzrites unknowingly eating them, causing them to be ingested alive and biting them in their stomachs. This was truly a Gehenna on earth. The frogs were burned alive in ovens and baked to death in bread. The plague of frogs also settled an ongoing border dispute with the Cushites, with the frogs only infesting the land of Egypt down to the centimeter. They would not even jump onto Cushite land. A huge multitude of sea snakes slithered onto the land, biting and killing hundreds of people. Paro sat on his throne covered in frogs, with his face contorting in excruciating pain as frogs pranced in and out of his clothing and body. He also felt frogs jumping and biting around in his belly, and fearing that this would endanger his life, he summoned Moshe and Aaron and begged Moshe to remove the frogs, even offering to let the nation of Israel go. Paro's confidence had taken a hit, but he still had a small sense of doubt that he was being tricked somehow. He pleaded with Moshe to remove the frogs immediately. Moshe agreed, and the plague began to recede, with most of the frogs beginning to die and some returning to the river at the conclusion of his prayer. The plague only lasted a day and a half. Now came another problem: disease. Frog carcasses covered the land, scraped together into huge piles of stinking, rotting mounds. Because the bodies of most of the frogs remained, Paro began to doubt Moshe's words and quickly rescinded his promise, qualifying the departure now outside the parameters of the initial request. This is still only the beginning, and what was to come would make this and the prior plague seem mild in comparison. If you like the content of this channel, get a hold of this book. It is literally jam-packed with information you will not find in most Torah publications. Its pages include topics like the fable of the money-hungry Jew, the lie that propelled the Holocaust, the real root of anti-Semitism, rightly dividing Mashiach, which contains startling truths about the Messiah you will not read anywhere else, Judaism in the New Testament, updated information about the creation of the Golem and the false Messiah, the commandment to wage war, the truth about the Shield of David, a compendium of all the false teachings in the Messianic movement to help you navigate what is truth, biblical capital punishment, and why you should be frightened of sinning, the significance of the land of Israel, the obligations of the student, the eye in the triangle, sanctified sex, how to think like a Jew, and much, much more. There is also an updated chapter 1, and along with all the other chapters, has hundreds of footnotes and references. This is a book that took 10 years to research and compile, and will be a welcome addition to the library of any discerning student of Torah and Mashiach. Get it today on Amazon and other online bookstores. Bye for now.